Okay, everyone, welcome to the MN204 revision class, where I'm going to cover the material, quite briefly go over the material that I covered in class. So it's very important when you're revising for MN204 to realise that the course was delivered by two people. I actually did weeks 1 to 6 excluding week 3, and Suleiman did week 7 to 12. So questions can come from across the course. So it's an important thing. Now, I think Suleiman's doing his own exam class. I want to talk a little bit today, not just about the topics, but also how I think my questions, or the questions that I would say, will be addressed. So it's very important when you're answering questions is to show evidence that you're thinking about things. So this is university education now. It's a little bit more than learning things off and presenting them back. So it's important that you read the question properly and show how you're mapping your knowledge to it. So if you reproduce verbatim a list of factors or ideas or whatever without mapping them to the question, it won't score particularly well. So what it's really important that you do is that you have to collate, review, critically appraise things, and don't just learn stuff off and answer the question that's actually set. So question technique is very important. It's like skiing or swimming or golf. If you don't have technique, you will struggle with it. So the most important thing to just straight off is to read the question that's asked on the paper and to actually answer what is asked, because if you misinterpret the question, you will not score well. If a question states discuss using examples and you leave out examples, you're not answering the question that's been asked, and you're going to be marked out of a lower score. Another thing that's very important to remember is that this is an ITIS module, so it's really important that when you pick examples and you answer questions, you think in terms of information systems and information technology, as opposed to generic business examples that may not really show that you've grasped the IT aspect of the problem. So examples, articles, diagrams are very useful. They help people understand the concept. Use your time well. Leaving early is just a complete waste of time. There is no need to panic. Exams are set or fair. They're marked fairly. Every opportunity is given to students. So even if you think things are going wrong or you've answered a question badly, keep going. Do the best you can. You've got continuous assessment marks and other things. So, if you want to do well, first thing is an answer should be professional. That means it needs to be well laid out. It needs to address the question that's been asked. It needs to show evidence of additional reading, some original thought. So you need to be able to do more than actually just reproduce what's in the notes or in the textbook, but show some of your own thoughts on the idea with additional reading. Bring together concepts is often important, so oftentimes students assume that all the content that they can answer a question for comes from one particular chapter or one particular set of slides, but if you can bring in concepts from other parts that are relevant, that's exceptionally good. A good answer has a conclusion, generally justified by analysis. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear, tell me what your evidence is actually saying. And it's important that you use the additional materials that have been posted to Moodle. Some of the tweets provide excellent examples of some of the challenges around information systems. So to score first, you need to show mastery of the topic, analytic insight, well-ordered and original conclusions. So 60 to 69 is intellectually competent. You know all the material. So if you produce an answer that answers the question as per the books, the notes and the readings, without actually showing really any additional insight, then that's what a 2-1 is. 50 to 59 is satisfactory, barely acceptable, so you're superficial. Poor attempts into the failure zones, and we're not going to deal with the 0 to 19 because people are better than that, and they could do better than that if they put in the effort. Okay, so the first thing that's really important is do read the question. So if it says define, then you're being asked to present a definition and move on. Describe and explain generally mean the same thing, but explain in full what you know about something. describe its characteristics. Don't just put down some bullet points. I want to see paragraphs. I want to see you making it clear that you've not only know the point, but you understand it. So discuss is more about a conversation where you're generally trying to prove something. But in order to prove something, you have to present both sides of the arguments. So it's important that, if you're talking about a particular thing, like the impact of IT on jobs, that you might present the positive as well as the negative. So if the word critically appears, it doesn't mean to criticize. It means presenting a balanced answer that points out mistakes and weaknesses and indicates favorable aspects of the subject or question. So it's important, to provide balance. So bearing in mind that I will have approximately 700 scripts to correct in May, be generous with paper. Leave plenty of spaces between answers, between questions, between paragraphs. So if you want to come back and add in some extra stuff, that's fine. Please do not write in the margins. That's what we use for marking. Don't have two answers on the one page. It's confusing. And if you've left a bit out and you have to go back, it gets worse. So you have 90 minutes. Use it well. Your mates are all going to be in there in the same exam, so there's no point leaving early. You're going to be on your own. So 90 minutes to answer 3 questions. All questions carry equal marks. However, note that questions will have a part A and a part B. So it's important that you check what the mark distribution within the question is. It's kind of like real estate. You should use, if 2/3 of the marks are for part A, then make sure you spend 2/3 of your time on part A. Absolutely no point leaving early. Pick your questions. It's worth spending a minute or two reading the paper and deciding which questions you know best. You can answer best. So remember to look at A and B, and don't get excited when you see one part that you know and rush off and answer it and then realize that you can't answer the second part. So time planning is really important. So there's nothing wrong with spending 10 minutes picking your questions carefully and plotting how you'll actually answer them. A couple of minutes on each, how you're going to answer each one. You're 15 minutes gone and you've worked out what you're actually going to say. It's a good investment of time. So allocate time to each part. Really important to remember this law of diminishing returns when it comes to answering questions. Lots of people write a beautiful first answer and they spend 45 minutes on it. And in the last 15 minutes on that question, they've probably gone from 75 to 85%. And then they're stuck with the last question with only 5 or 10 minutes to answer it. And as a result, they can only score 20 or 30% on it. They would be much better spending the extra time they spent on the first question on the last question and ensuring that they pass all the questions or score well in all the questions. So what's really important is in the answer plan you identify the question requirements. So read the question, underline the key words. Don't just assume that there's a single part or a single thing required in the question. Read it and work out why every word is there. Break it down. So think, what are the important theories? What's this question about? What models, what frameworks, what readings can I apply to it? So you can lay it out with a mind map like I have here. So the idea of a mind map is, you start on a topic and then you break it down into different parts and they'll form the different sections of your answer. And then think, before you start writing, is the flow, is the order of these right? Because, a well-ordered answer will score better. So can you add in examples? What does Ryanair do? What do Paddy Power do? What does Amazon do? What do the companies, the IT companies, Netflix, do? What pressures are they under? What are the jobs they're doing? How do those organizations function? How is that relevant to the answer you're doing? And when you're using an answer, explain why that example is relevant. It's important to plan your time based on marks. So if you think, that there's, most of the marks are going for a particular part of the question, that's what you focus on. So the good news is everything you write gets marked. So if you write an answer plan and there's some information in there that you haven't actually spoken about in your answer, you will get some credit for it. But only if it's for your answer. We don't deduct marks for what you write. But blather and rubbish won't actually score. So, telling me about your summer holidays isn't actually relevant. So this is an example of an answer plan from a different module, MN333 in 2016, but it shows how a question about social data analytics will be answered, and it shows how much time you'd spend on each part of the question. So that's an example of an answer plan. Obviously you might populate it in more detail or less detail depending on how much you know, but what's really useful about an answer plan is if you think about something while you're answering the next question, you can just jot back and jot it down. And so even if you don't have time to expand your answer afterwards, you're going to score something for the fact that it's referenced in your answer plan. So, regarding studying, what's really important is that lecture notes are not published material. They shouldn't be the sole resource used to answer a question or for preparing. You need to read any additional material that was posted to Moodle. You need to check out the Twitter feed that appears on the right hand side of the Moodle page. You also need to read some stuff for yourself. You should be, as a business student, reading newspapers, academic journals, financial magazines, technology articles, anything like that that is able to support your answer. Just remember, the quality of the source is important. A random blog is not as valid as an academic journal. So those lecture notes exist to help participants understand and to note take, but it's not a substitute for what goes on in the book and what other material you need to read. So 3 questions. Questions will have 2 parts. Keep an eye on the marks. Use the book. It's really important. Look at the relevant tweets. Okay, so in the next section, I'm going to start going through the material we've covered. But one of the things to watch out for is that I have actually set 2 exams, one for the summer and one for the autumn, and I can't really remember which is which. So if you think I'm indicating that there's a question or something, you might be right, but it mightn't be a question that's going to appear in the summer paper. So what's really important is that you do cover all the material. So what I'm going to try and do is going to summarize it and identify the important things that you should focus on. Okay, so the next video will have a summary, more revision summary.